Still getting set up. I will start shortly. Give me about 8 more minutes.
think he built all this alone. So many memories. It's not home anymore. Not without Rost. There's nothing for me here anymore.
Hello, hello. How are we doing tonight? I'll make sure everything's muted, sorry. Phone. Good, good, good. Look at how happy Aloy looks in the snow. I love her little flyaways. They didn't have to, they chose to. Thank you, Gorilla, for making a human that looks like a human. I'm going to do a quick chat at Rost's grave to start out tonight.
Hi, Rost. I'm back. It's been a while. I've got what I need to destroy Hades. The Master Override. Now all I have to do is drive it into Hades' skull, so no problem there. The final battle will be fought at Meridian. Hades will come for the Spire, and I'll be ready. I found out how Elizabeth died. She sacrificed herself, as you might expect. Said something about going home. I wonder where that was for her. If I ever find out, I'd like to go there. See it myself. Assuming I actually survived the battle at Meridian, of course. Which, let's face it, is... well... who knows? Well, I'll try to come back if I can, but... I guess this might be it. Thank you, Rost. Thank you for everything.
How's the stream quality for everyone? Hey Barry, how are you doing tonight? My internet is being weird. Is it coming through okay on y'all's end? How's everyone's middle of the week going so far? Like the video quality? Image quality? Okay, good, good, good. What was I gonna do? I haven't found any of the other cauldrons. What did I say last night when I left that I was gonna do today? We're not doing the final quest yet. I still haven't put any skill points in. So that's been fun. I have some stuff in Frozen Wilds I can do. I have to do all the cauldrons still. Which I wasn't sure if I was going to do stuff outside of the main quest. I'm pretty proud of myself for how far I've made it without using any skills on Ultra Hard. I feel like I should confirm that every time we turn it on, just so you guys know I'm not cheating. Okay, we're on Ultra Hard. We got no HUD. We got... I put it on super sensitive for some reason. Standard controls on everything. Fun little... Let's change up the face paint. I didn't wear the Seeker's marking since the beginning of the game. Just pop that back on. Oh, your PlayStation's not detecting your mic? You might have to manually go in and select it, or is the microphone turned on? Because that mic has a power button. If you're using the Yeti. I don't have mine up here to look at it to compare for you. There's also, on the back, you might benefit from selecting a cardioid unidirectional pattern, because I know it has a bidirectional, an omnidirectional, and a unidirectional setting, if that's the microphone I think you have. And that might help cut on some of the room noise that it was picking up before. The cardioid pattern just looks like a semicircle, but more than a semicircle a little bit. Like a heart. Why do I know those terms? Don't ask me, guys. I had a training with the dude who's really good at sound. It was really expensive to bring him in, and I gotta go because I was a professional sound engineer for like a minute. Because why not? Oh, sweet. Send me a party invite. You got your headphones and everything set up again? Oh, sweet. There we go. Join party. We're going to learn some math and physics.
Hey, I hear
What's
something.
up? Welcome back.
Yay.
Glad to have you again. We're going to learn about Gödel's theorem.
Cool.
I mean, if you want, you can talk about whatever. But
Yeah,
I know that's where we left off, so... I'm bummed there was a book that's on the way, but we had a little hiccup in transport because I was going to read ahead and try and get ready for this, but instead I'm going to be kind of learning it live. That is Michael again.
Yep. Hi. So, I'm back. I now actually have a decent sized screen with which to see the stream.
Awesome.
I got the iPad on it, so I'm not squinting as much.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We should have probably thought ahead. I mean, I don't know, thought ahead on it last
I
time,
thought
but
ahead about my setup a little bit more.
I mean, that's the whole, it's trial and error. Now we know. I change little things on my setup every time I stream most of the time, too. Like, I had everything, positioned wrong earlier tonight, but, oh, I'm going to turn the in-game audio down just a skosh so that we make sure we can hear you okay, because I want to focus on the stuff you're teaching, so I learn it. Building our own Apollo here.
Well, so, yeah, last time I was talking about Gödel's theorem, and, it's not, I mean, there's actually, like, multiple theorems, and it might be, like, the best to get, like, into some of the technical stuff, but the way that it's boiled down for people, mostly, is pretty close enough to the full definitions that it usually doesn't. It would take like a lot more time to go into it. But
in what sense? Just actually breaking down the math?
Yeah.
Because it goes into
rigorous definitions and stuff.
Because even just reading it, I was like, I don't know what any of these letters stand for. And it's a simple equation, but it's like within a context of like mathiness.
So it's the idea that way back they were trying to make math more rigorous, and you have the idea of proving like statements in math, and math as its own language, and like how to properly formulate statements so that you'll be free of contradictions, like the classic,
like the grammar of math, almost.
Yeah. So
no double negatives, except for yes in math.
So, like, you have something like, this statement is false, right? And so people really didn't like that. And so they say, in our math language, we don't want that to be a thing. Nobody coming up with this statement is false. Everything written in math language must be true or false, and not pokey weirdness.
Oh, so like you're literally saying this statement is false. None of the weird paradoxical shit.
I mean, there's like a lot.
Well, there's paradoxical stuff, but nothing that inherently is internally self-contradictory like that.
Yeah, well, that's what they were trying to do, but.
Oh, so you're saying that was the stuff they were exploring, not the stuff they weren't? I might not be. I might have misunderstood.
To come up with rules of language so that you couldn't have those kind of sentences.
Gotcha.
So they saw the existence of the sentence as being a problem with the language, and so they wanted to make.
They wanted to make a language where you couldn't make a false statement.
Yeah, or you couldn't make a contradictory statement.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, that you could always resolve some things.
Okay. I think I'm tracking now.
But ultimately, that didn't actually work out. Like, that's one of the things that people realized that they couldn't actually achieve. And everyone kind of, for a long time, everyone thought, well, if we can just put everything into the right kind of order, then there's no possibility for contradiction, and everything will have a truth value, and everything will be able to, and we will always be able to derive that. And so all the statements you have in like the language that you're making of math, because people actually made multiple different versions in a way of math over the years. There are really very subtle, small differences between them that are really, really abstract and hard to talk about very much, but it has to do with the axioms, basically, that you pick. And the idea is that all of the statements you could write using that language, you could show that connected to the axioms in such a way that you could prove them to be true or prove them to be false.
And just because it's been kind of a long time since I've had a math course, can you remind me what an axiom is in definition?
It's like the primary
or as a
assumption
concept?
that you're making.
Okay, that's what I
right?
thought.
It's like a rule of the system. So, like, when you make your mathy language, you set down your rules of derivation, and then your axioms, which are like the starting points of all the derivations. And
It has been a
then
solid 20 years since I've been
grow
in a
out of
context
that.
where I had to think about that.
Yeah. It's not super bad as far as like being able to talk about, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
people
no, I'm
use-
good. I'm just like, oh yeah, it's been a minute since I've heard any of these words
Oh,
anywhere.
yeah. So the surprising thing was basically that you couldn't make this perfect language. Like the two like requirements of the language that you never be able to make a contradiction, and also that you be able to like connect everything in this orderly way, that everything that was true could be connected to your axioms through the rules. And it turns out that those two things actually contradict each other, and that has all sorts of crazy consequences that people still kind of find mind-boggling sometimes. So basically that if you have a system, then either you can have contradictions or you end up with things that can never be proven but are still true. But in order to know that they're true, you have to go outside of that system. Like
Okay, that's
every
that's
system
the
has
little bit
blind
that I was
spots.
really connecting with, where I was talking about, and you're like, oh, that's just like the thing. It's that you have
Yeah,
to exit a system
it
in
is.
order to properly evaluate it.
So yeah, you can think of it as blind spots in the rules, right? So you have your system, which is your language, your set of rules, and it can do all these neat things. And either you can use it to end up proving something and the opposite, like it's contradictory, or it always has a blind spot. You have to pick one of those two. So of course nobody generally wants to have a system that is contradictory, because then if you have a contradictory system, then you can prove everything is true regardless of what it is, and that's not really considered very useful. So yeah, everything has a blind spot, and the classic example is the sentence, this this sentence has no proof, or this statement can't be like disproven, for example. Or no, this statement can't be proven. And so if the statement is false, then it can be proven, and if it can be proven, then it must be true, but you assume that it was false. And then likewise, if the statement is true, then the statement is that it can't be proven, which means you can never prove that it's true. Even though you did just prove that it was true, you did so from outside of a formal system. So like regular English it contains contradictions. It's not a logical system like math. It's a messy language.
Very much so.
And so in our kind of messy way of thinking, we're able to see that this thing is true and to our satisfaction, but we're also able to put down in regular language all sorts of other contradictions and paradoxes. And so you can't necessarily go and say that based on like being able to say something, whether that actually proves that a thing is true or possible, just being able to say it. You know, like this sentence is false doesn't actually prove that the sentence is true or false. It's just a problem of forming the sentence. So there's a bunch of other examples of those. The barber's paradox or the set of all sets. So you have a barber who shaves everyone who doesn't shave themselves. So who shaves the barber? And that's the classic paradox that was troubling to Russell, this famous mathematician who was making it his goal to make this perfect language of mathematics complete.
Can you unpack that paradox a little? Like, what's the problem with, obviously there's the inherent, yes, who shaves the barber, but what does that mean for math? I guess, you know what I mean? Or I guess, what's the application of that? Oh, did I lose you?
I accidentally hit mute.
The mute button. I was like, oh no, I lost you.
Get my microphone to be not falling over. It keeps tilting over on me.
Oh yeah, you got to tighten the little thing on the side.
Yeah. So yeah, for that, Russell was trying to write set theory, and he was trying to make some sort of ultimate perfect set theory language that would tell you everything you could want to know about sets. It never had any problems. So he was quite upset by this proof when it came out that you couldn't do that. So, pretty troublesome to lots of people, because it introduced a kind of uncertainty into something that people thought was the one thing in the universe that you could be completely certain of, which is math. Right? So you're like, yeah, math you can know beyond any doubt, right? Because there's not anything physical that could deceive you about it. But it turns out math itself is inherently a little sneaky in ways that are not obvious.
It has just little things here and there that are gaps that need closed that are unclosable.
Yeah, and the gaps can be, they might not necessarily be little, they're just hard to see.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive.
So, yeah, it is hard to think about a little bit, but there's just so many ways that it gets out into other areas of knowledge. So a paradox that's kind of connected to that is in computer science called the halting paradox.
And what is that?
Is the idea that you can never write a computer program that will take as input another program, and as output will tell you if that program does a specific thing, such as stop running at some point, or eventually say a particular number, like 3 or something. You can never write a program that does that for every program that you can put in.
Gotcha. So, you're always going to have to modify it in some way in order to fit other programs. In the gamut of programs, not all programs, but if you want it to, it's not going to be able to cover all of them. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, whatever fancy program you write, somebody else can eventually write another program for which your fancy program won't work. There's always a blind spot. And a program is basically a set of rules.
It's a bunch of heuristics.
Of doing things. Yeah. And so there's a really deep connection between proving things in math and computer programs, because they're basically just applying this rule-based system to arrive at some destination. And so there's a lot of interesting things like that are just outside of
That's just really interesting to take and then apply to social programming in people.
Yeah, if you have a heuristic, then there's always going to be a blind spot eventually. So people have thought about what that means in regards to AI. Do you have an AI that's going to inherently be unable to understand something? Or does it mean that there are things that are unknowable by people? So it's there's some mysterious arrangement of words which actually represents some big truth about the universe, but because of the way people are, like, no one can ever understand this series of words. It will never make sense to them.
What kind of, I guess, is there like, I guess there's not really examples of that because
nobody knows.
You can only think about it theoretically,
nobody can figure it out.
If it's unknowable, then it would be inherently then unknowable.
Yeah, and it might not be unknowable to everyone. Maybe somebody, some big, giant galaxy computer brain could figure it out, but humans can't or something. But however big of a system that you're working with to understand something, it's always going to have limits. And that kind of logic flowed into a lot of stuff in psychology where...
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like all of a sudden it's starting to make me think of thinking.
Yeah, like this kind of limits of rationality. So before that, there was like kind of it was thought that there was like a really well-defined idea of what does it mean to act rationally and to do the most rational, optimal thing. And there was all this stuff about how people would logically act, and that kind of played out in psychology and economics and a bunch of other things. And it was kind of underlying that was the idea that, well, yeah, obviously the most rational thing to do is just to apply the correct heuristic.
This is starting to go into my favorite topic it's the research of Kahneman and Tversky, who wrote Judgment Under Uncertainty on heuristics and biases, because their core question is, are humans good intuitive statisticians?
Yeah, well, they can be in certain limited cases, but in a lot of cases, no. I mean, that's, I think, what they arrived at.
Yeah, it was like...
Are just really bad at it.
Even the statisticians themselves still end up falling for the faulty heuristics and biases.
But the interesting thing about math is not necessarily that doesn't mean that people are really bad. I mean, obviously they can improve, but it also means that the goal of being able to perfectly estimate, to have this ideal heuristic, is actually unattainable.
Yeah.
Period. So that kind of leads me to like this other thing that I was fooling around with, like, because back when I had just graduated, and I was tinkering around with a bunch of different things, like Millennium Problem stuff. And like one of the things I was really interested in was applying this line of thought in economics, because I was like somewhat frustrated by some of the ideas that people would have where they would talk about like equilibriums in markets, and that people would act rationally and therefore
don't get me started on that.
Humans towards this
don't
idea.
buy on logic. Let me tell, I sold money. People buy with emotion and justify with backward logic.
Mm-hmm.
I have negotiated decisions around millions of dollars.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
I mean, it was home loans.
Yeah, I was actually looking at home loans today randomly because if like basically how Steve had been staying with my parents and helping my dad, and his health has improved to the point where they're like, well, you can move over and stay with Mike and Eric. We have a 2-bedroom apartment, and so it's like, well, should we get a 3-bedroom, or should we like get a house, something like that? Well, how much money do we have? Oh man, and houses cost infinite money.
Yeah, they're like crazy right now.
Crying because of how expensive it is. So yeah, but I mean, to get away from that, back then we were like in the aftermath of like the big 2008 crash and all this stuff going on.
Halfway through college when all that went down.
And like people were still talking about like how automated trading and those kind of things maybe they thought was causing problems. So some people wanted to blame that, although I'm pretty sure it was just a very human decisions that led to the problems. But it got me thinking about how does this, how do the limits, even on computer programs, apply to things like programs trying to make financial decisions? Because programs are always going to have a blind spot. And so, is it that, do their blind spots mean that you don't have this, like, rational equilibrium? So, it turns out that the whole notion of having, like, this perfectly informed financial equilibrium is, like, impossible.
Well, you're gambling on human decisions.
Yeah, but, like, see, what people always say is, like, oh, well, people are imperfect, but they're still
People
trying
in
to
groups are
get
going to behave in generally predictable ways or something.
Well, they think that, you know, you have all these imperfections, but maybe they still approximate some sort of perfect behavior. But really, what
Regression to the mean or whatever?
Yeah, really what I was kind of getting at is there isn't really a perfect behavior.
Well, it's going to
That's
vary
kind of an
person to
illusion.
person.
Yeah. So, like...
Because that's such a subjective... Who gets to decide what perfect is defined as?
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, they would be like, well, perfect is however you make the most money or something. Which, I mean, you know...
But that assumes that all investors are investing on the same purpose.
Mm-hmm. But they're not.
It's a bet on human psychology. Think about GameStop stock.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, and then you get the people, and it's literally people trying to influence people into holding when it's going down, etc. Like, if people are being influenced by the will of others and the motives of other people, then they're placing their trust in them, then you can't
Yeah, totally.
predict.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm firmly in the Kahneman camp that people are not being very close to rational in most things.
Well, I like how his later research unpacks that with basically, are you operating out of System 1 or System 2? And then how well informed is your System 2?
Yeah. So...
Because you can have rational thought, but misinformation, and then it's like, well, how do you judge what's good information in the era of misinformation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I guess what I was trying to, like...
Yeah, sorry, I
to,
totally,
confront... Oh, no, it's fine. I was trying to, like, confront the strongest, most ideal version of kind of the other arguments.
Okay, gotcha.
Where people are like, well, you know, there's all these problems where people aren't acting exactly rationally, but if they did, everything would work out. That, you know, there's this dream economy of everything being in sync and resolving, and there being like this perfect balance point that you would get to if only you didn't have to deal with real people, only ideal people. And the big thing was that whole notion of dealing with those, of having that system of ideal people is itself kind of a contradiction. That
Yeah.
It's not like a failure to reach the ideal, it's that there's not an ideal there to reach. It's like an illusory rainbow sort of setup. So it's like the difference between the way people were thinking about it, they're like, well, it's like archery, right? Nobody's going to perfectly hit the very center of the target. They're always going to have a little bit off one way or the other. And then that was kind of the idea of the game of economics. Everybody's trying to aim perfectly at the center target. But the other way to look at it is actually it's a completely imperfectible game. There's not a center of the target. It's more like the game of pick a number, where two people pick a number and the person who picks the biggest number wins.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're playing against the behavior of other people, and they might have motives that clash with yours. They might need certain stocks to fail or for their own names because maybe they've bet against it.
Oh yeah, and so, like, basically, it kind of comes down to, like, in math, they have, in game theory, these, like, equilibrium points called Nash equilibria, where, like, the behavior of people can become predictable because you have these points where choices would always be worse if they changed in one direction or another. And so the idea is that players will move to these points. But I was like, those points, there isn't a point in the game, one of those Nash points in the economics game, because the moves, instead of the moves being like in chess or something, or checkers, or like Warcraft or any of those where you can like pick from some set of moves, the moves in economics are actually like sentences. They're like language. Like
Yeah.
say, like, you know, it's more like it's a language-based game, and so when you have a system, when your strategies are like rock, paper, scissors, you can say, well, the equilibrium of rock, paper, scissors is a even random mixture of the three alternatives.
Yeah, but they're all evenly weighted against one another.
Yeah, and you
with
can,
a
like,
perfect
prove
probability.
that. And so, but when you have language, like, if you look at the space of all the possible, like, things you might say in language, that doesn't fit into an easy geometric object. It's messy, like languages. It has some of the same properties as that. But more, like, the narrow thing I got to was that when you're working in, like, finance, the moves are like contracts. Like, you propose some agreement and people agree or they disagree, and then they propose an agreement and you agree or disagree.
Yeah, because that's when I was in sales. I was literally negotiating sales with people, and it's like a lot of moving parts, even in something that's so formally cut and dry as a set amount of money being borrowed on a set market rate day.
Yeah, so...
And even that, with those things set, there's so many moving variables, even when we have all the formulas laid out.
Mm-hmm. People are just trying to come to an agreement where they both agree to the same, like, program of action. And you notice that those would get really complicated even when the underlying principle was not, like, a complicated thing. And that's kind of the whole idea, is that there are two sides. They're trying to win a game by picking a bigger number, and in a sense, the size of the number and the complexity of the deal were analogous to each other. And this kind of gets into why there are super duper long license agreements and fine print on credit card that goes for 10 pages and all of these things, is that naturally, like, these kind of, like, agreements will get more and more complicated because that's more and more advantageous for the person offering the agreement. They can cover more, like, cases and
well, you don't want someone to find the loophole, because you are, at the end of the day, two people who are each trying to gain from one another or minimize loss.
Yeah, but the thing is that those agreements are made out of language, and they constitute a program, which is acting like a system that has necessary...
And people are always going to be hacking that system, and so it's always going to have to get more and more convoluted for every possible thing. But then there's, like, at what point does it become so complex that it's not navigable?
Yeah, and so the idea is that if you had some perfect economy of people trying to always make the best agreements with each other, that they would just keep making more and more complicated agreements until nobody could understand the agreement.
Which honestly feels frickin' relatable with where we're at.
Yeah, and so the idea that in this whole, like, mini game of agreements, that there is some, like, master agreement set up that people will all gravitate towards to varying degrees. You know, like, like the horizon point in a painting or a point of perspective where all the lines go towards it eventually. There's not like a single horizon point when it comes to like contracts and agreements. That more they just keep diverging out into complexity. And so it was just sort of attempting to dispel this whole myth of equilibrium being the thing that we should consider, is that the equilibrium is always going to depend upon somebody doing something irrational, because the rationality is a relative term. It's like relative to the other people that you're playing against, because there's always a blind spot, and so
what might look irrational to one person might actually be a well thought out strategy to someone else.
Yeah.
Where it's only irrational if you're assuming the end goal is the same as yours.
Yeah.
Like if you're unaware of I sometimes state questions as directives.
Yeah.
That was more to check, like, am I tracking kind of with the gist of that?
No, it makes sense. I'm just like,
gotcha.
Suppose you have, it's basically that being able to play something perfectly only works when the game you're playing is very limited. Like tic-tac-toe, you can play that perfectly. It's solved. Like, a lot of games you could play perfectly. But when you start to include language in the game, then language has this mysterious property that now you can no longer play the game perfectly because of this wildness that languages have in them related to the Godot blind spots. So, since real life has language, all these real life scenarios can never truly be played perfectly. So,
gotcha.
I was kind of trying to get back. Let's see, where was I going on about like Gödel's theorem and halting? There's like so many other cool things related to that, which you can kind of derive. Like, if you can't write a program that can tell when another program halts, then you also can't write a program that will give you even the probability that a program of a particular length halts. And there was a famous mathematical result that was showing that, like, if you knew the probability of, as a function of length of program, like out of all programs that are 100 lines long, what percentage of them will eventually stop running if you start running them? Like, even something like that, it can't.
This is so crazy to think about, even like okay, so like that could apply to genetics and stuff like that. Like, no, solving that can help us understand. I was just the other day I was reviewing like just the basics of telomeres. And so, like, in cell replication, this is like big overview. I'm gonna mess this up a little bit. There's like between 50 and 250 pieces of code in a telomere that fall off every time it replicates, which the telomeres are the end bits of code on chromosomes. And so the problem is that telomerase can actually prevent that from happening, but the problem is that gets out of control and you get your telomeres not causing apoptosis and senescence in your cells, which is cell death. Then you get cancer.
Yeah. Cancer, not good.
So basically, they try to suppress the telomerase to cause apoptosis of cancer cells, which that is what it sounds like. They cell wall breakdown and
yeah. I mean, The ideas have like a place in genetics.
I just think about because genetics is a type of programming and is a type of coding that we don't fully understand. Was where I was like, genetics themselves is a type of programmed.
You could think of trying to create some sort of perfect genome that could never have a disease or a virus or something, and maybe that's not really possible, right? And it's like, well, eventually, you know, you get to some point where it wouldn't be affected, but you could always come up with another program. So, like, if you have, you know, some mechanism in a cell, like a big protein or something, and its like job is to look at a sequence of genes that come in, and it's like, if I carry out these instructions, is it gonna create a virus or a disease or break the cell in some way? And it's there as like a gatekeeper to look at that sequence and say, is this a good or a bad sequence? And it turns out that you can basically always find a way around those gatekeepers. Like, the gatekeeper himself is a sequence, right? He's a big protein. He's got his own sequence. But then, however big that sequence is, for every gatekeeper you build, there's some anti-gatekeeper that can fool him. Just like for every computer program, there's some sneaky program that can trick it into thinking that it is going to stop when it actually doesn't stop. And so, yeah, it does kind of have that whole thing where, you know, when you're evolving, you're not necessarily evolving toward like a fixed point, but it's like continuously moving in some strange direction. I mean, it might be curving around or whatever in the space, but it's more like expanding rather than moving towards a destination. So like that's, I know there was like a book, I think it was called The Red Queen. It was about evolution and stuff. It was kind of neat. I remember reading it like a really long time ago. I wish I remembered more about it. It was the idea that like so many things are this scenario where it's like a perpetual race of improvement, but it's also a race without a destination, and it kind of comes from the Alice in Wonderland scene, or the Red Queen, where she says that you have to be running all the time or you'll fall behind, even if you're not going anywhere when you're running.
That's why, like,
And
the
it's
rabbit's
kind of
like,
a
late.
paradoxical thing to say. But yeah, that's another book, I guess, if you really like evolution and like, it's got, I think it has like some...
My problem is I just like learning anything I can learn. That's my problem.
Hey, that's a really good trait to have. That's definitely
Gets
the
me
way
in
to
trouble,
go.
though.
But good trouble, I assume. Well,
I don't
maybe not
know.
always, but worth it trouble, I guess.
Yeah. I suppose.
Let's see what's going on. The infamous tripwire strategy.
Yeah, you know, here's the thing. Ain't broke, not fixing.
Yeah.
It's effective, and this thing is gonna like one-shot me otherwise. Actually, I've got a lot of health now that I'm pretty high level. Might have no skills, but the health does get raised.
Well, that's good, I guess. Otherwise, you'd have a problem of everything one-shotting you eventually.
Yep.
Super effective.
You'd have to go through and take a no-hit run.
That
Which would be
terrifying.
an experience. I've seen people do it with Breath of the Wild, where it's like if they like die or if they get, I don't remember if it was no hit or if it was no death, but like it was basically they kept having to restart because they kept getting to a point where they were failing it, you know?
I could understand some no-death runs, but I mean, in some games, but you'd have to like at least, I feel like you'd have to get the skills if you were going to do a no-death run, probably. I think there's only a few games that I tried something like that with, that I was in any way good enough to do that. And I think I remember the first game where I was really proud of it. So I managed to do a no-death run of the Super Nintendo Zelda, Link to the Past. And I thought that was, like, really amazing. I mean, I don't know, it might not be that amazing objectively, but it was pretty cool at the time.
No, it's anytime anyone does any kind of challenge run, I'm like, hell yeah, that's awesome. I tried spear only run on this, and then I learned that there's one room where you have to do a crazy jump to make that work, and then I didn't use only my spear in that room. I gave up on the jumping. So you had to like perfectly jump on it's in the Deep Secrets of the Earth quest. There's a part where there's Eclipse soldiers on a balcony, and it was just, I tried to jump up the thing and it was just not happening for me.
What am I missing? Oh wow, that's underground guy popping up. Is that a boss? But yeah, let's see. What else can I say about Lilith here? Lots of weird things. Like it just pops up all over the place in like really strange and unexpected ways. Kind of like that feeling about.
Hold on, I'm dying.
Oh, yeah, focus.
You can keep talking, I'm just also being meat grindered by a meat grinder.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes me think a little bit about, like, how the machines in this...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Like, it seems like they should have, you know, a critical weakness. And I mean, I guess they do, right?
They do, yeah.
Eventually found the weakness.
Yeah, it was that they were designed with no backdoor was the problem.
Yeah.
And so it took over 50 years to build them a backdoor.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Total's theorem basically is that you can always make a backdoor, but it doesn't mean that you can do it fast. So, that kind of makes sense. But, I mean, even then, like, backdoors can be really strange things, right? They don't have to be in terms of transmitting signals, but would just be in terms of behavior.
You see, it's all because of the polyphasic waveform entanglements, technobabble, that they made up for the game.
Yeah, technobabble is kind of fun sometimes to think about. Like, are they really thinking like this? Is it really just phonetic poetry on a restricted set of words? Or did somebody have an idea?
On that one, I've had some theories because they actually have another thing that's encoded as a sound file, and there's a lot to do with like the Nuke songs. And so there seems to be some sort of audio cues built into how the machines communicate and can be controlled with the modern day Gaia machines. Because the Banuk also refer to like using imitating chirps and stuff to like, and like they believe the machines to be alive too. That's a whole thing.
Yeah, I wonder in the future interacting with things might be more of a new style, I'm thinking more use of artificial intelligence. But who knows, that might be a while off. Gotta hope that there's not a Pharaoh plague in the next 30 years.
We gotta survive cordyceps and climate change first. The Pharaoh plague comes after the climate change. Because that's how the technology was built. They rapidly advanced AI for the clawback period. And that's why Liz is Leo. You see, because she worked for Pharaoh. She helped develop a lot of the robotics that got Ted Faro his money and his reputation as the man who saved the world. Just like Leo was behind the Manhattan Project in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's why I'm like, Liz is Leo. Because unlock this energy technology towards what should be a good aim, like, hey, nuclear energy is a great thing. It's a lot of advancement and a lot of technology. And who unlocked the freaking nuclear chain reaction? Our buddy.
Yeah.
He's not the only one, but he's the one that had the big breakthrough. Wrote a letter to Einstein. Helped develop a cadre of scientists to make sure that America got nuclear bombs before Germany, when Germany was a threat, but then Germany wasn't the threat anymore necessarily. We got there first. And then begged us not to use it. And that never made its way to Truman.
Yeah, I remember in school they would always like seem to emphasize how necessary it was, but it seems...
Which, he was the one that initially was like saying it was necessary and helped get the Manhattan Project off the ground, but like... Or he's one of the ones, you know, he's not, obviously it's a whole team of people. But like, from what I've been reading recently, at least, like, but like, basically, then his letter got like 70 technicians and lab workers and stuff that worked on the Manhattan Project, basically saying like, hey, this, like, don't use this without at least giving Japan terms of surrender and letting them know that we have this power. And then Truman instead announced it to the world by firing it on people.
Yeah, that sucks. I know they dropped 2. I thought there was
Fat Man and Little Boy
in between them, but maybe Japan had like.
I thought they were both dropped on the same day.
Really?
Fat Man and Little Boy.
I thought they were like dropped a ways apart from each other. But...
Yeah, they were on 2 different cities, but I thought they were dropped on the same day. Let's look it up.
I have to read my history and look up that deal. But, yeah, I had always thought that there was like a few days in between them.
Was it?
They wanted to give Japan a chance to surrender before they dropped the nukes.
Let's see.
I don't remember.
Atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oh, yeah, it was 3 days between. 6th and 9th of August. No. And like the thing that the letter to Truman from Leo Szilard was a petition saying like, you have to draft clear terms of surrender first and at least try a diplomatic solution. And like I've like looked it up and they were saying like Patton and MacArthur and Nimitz and etc. like most of them have some statement of some degree. Like the severity differs, and like it's not that they were uninvolved, but like there was behind the scenes stuff of like they were pretty much, most of the generals were like, this is unnecessary. So, I don't know. I'm like really badly
Yeah, I'm just like reading this. Let's see. They said they had given them a surrender ultimatum, it looks like in July. A couple weeks early.
But when they gave it to them, there was no, I don't think there was an awareness of the bomb's existence. So it was like, there was no warning that like, if you don't surrender, this is what you're gonna face, kind of thing. Like, so it was that the actual unveiling of just how powerful the bombs were was having them used on people. And that's when the bombs entered the world stage.
Bombs.
From my understanding of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe right. I wish I remembered more of some of my World War II history, at least. I mean, I know some, but I guess I focus more on, like, Europe wars and, like, the Pacific War that much. But...
he's falling in love with a merchant's daughter.
Yeah. Who knows what could have been, I guess. But certainly, it's better to avoid any kind of unnecessary death. I know there was like a really big deal over, was it Dresden or one of the cities in Germany that got bombed really bad just with conventional bombs. That was kind of considered a war crime now.
Yeah, that's a whole topic. I've been reading. I'm in the middle of reading a lot of books on that era. So I bought on Audible. I bought a ton of Richard Rhodes books, and so he wrote like Making of the Atomic Bomb, Twilight of the Bombs, blah blah blah. And then I bought some stuff on like the rise and fall of the Third Reich and other stuff. And I'm working through little bit by little bit, like all of them at once. Kind of doing the ADHD like buffet. Little of this, little of that, and then coming back to each one a bit at a time. And then it's like Making of the Atomic Bomb. I've read the opening probably 6 hours of that on audiobook. And I don't know if that's actual 6 hours or 6 hours at 2.5 speed. So pardon me as I don't clarify because I don't remember. But like listen to the opening third of that book probably 7 or 8 times. Because that talks about a lot of people whose names I forget, but like Marie Curie and the person that went and visited Marie Curie and saw the burns on her hands. And just, it's like, because the way Rhodes writes, like, he like goes into like the psychology of the people that were also working on it all. And like, this is that person's values. This is the things that person like said stance-wise on ethical stuff. And it's a very interesting approach to writing a history of like, well, based on their writings, like, you know, you've got Zillard's commandments, so you know like a bit of his morality in it too, especially with the petition and blah blah blah. Like, it's just very interesting. Like, obviously there's only so much statements you can really make about the inner struggle of people in historical figures because you're not there in the private conversations. You only see what gets published and made public. Like, it's just still interesting to think about to me though. That's all.
Yeah.
Are there any quests here? There's the one where the person's stealing food that I still need to do.
I mean, why are they stealing food? Really that bad?
Yeah, it is really that bad.
Oh. I mean, like, I know things are desperate, I guess. The reason that they're stealing is they're just hungry, or are they some kind of bandit merchant?
That's what we're going to find out. Whenever I find the quest giver. I don't remember where it is. But I know there's a quest about someone stealing food that you have to go chase down and find the food. And I thought it was in one of these little outside Karjan settlements.
Man, I'm gonna have to reorder that book. I tried to get the get Amazon to like refund it, but they don't have an option for like the wrong address. It's like,
I thought there was one because I've had that happen before. Maybe they've removed it.
They have a whole bunch of different things. I mean, the closest I could see was like item not delivered or missing, but I mean, it was delivered. It was just to somebody else. So,
We'll figure it out.
yeah, well, I mean, even if we don't, it's not the end of the world or anything.
Yeah. Alrighty. Here it is.
I barely turn a profit even in the best of times, especially since I usually hand out what I can to those in need. Would you care for some fruit? Better enjoy it before someone runs off with it.
Yeah, so, trying to remember and think of other stuff to ramble on about
Not enough to
the
force me
theorem
to
or
close shop, but definitely
programming or something.
Have you found any
Yeah,
sign of the thief?
but
just a
there's a lot of stuff in there. I should like reread that myself. I don't know where my copy of that from way back
the
is,
gods blame the wildlife,
but
I doubt
got a
it.
lot of interesting
I
characters,
guess they have more to worry
a
about
crab
than
and
the
a record player and some other strange
Is there
things.
anyone you suspect?
I've known most people here since childhood. None of them strike me as a good
But yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Like, I love learning, but it's so much easier when you have someone to talk to about what you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so boring to just read by yourself and then just have it just accumulate in your head without anywhere of actually then outputting what you've learned.
I'll see what I can find.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like, I guess the stages of learning and knowing something, I guess, they say, teach it to other people. And that's how you can, like, more thoroughly learn something by
Exactly.
explaining it to someone else.
To teach it. And that's why part of why I keep saying, like, asking my questions as directives, and like it's a question where I'm re-explaining it back. Like, did I explain this back correctly? Because that's like, I want to integrate it, but I want to integrate it so I make an open-handed statement where it is a declarative statement, but it's said with an open hand internally. People just don't always. I need to be better about it, but it's just how my head works when I'm learning, and so I just end up making declarations when I mean questions, and then I just try to explain to people that that's what I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. Yeah. So, let's see. Oh yeah, I was about to get to this guy who had done a proof about the probability of things halting. And there's a really neat thing. So basically, if you take all those probabilities of all those different size programs, right? So for every number, there's associated with it a set of programs, which is all the programs that are exactly that many bits long. And then you have another number that's the percentage of those programs that would eventually stop if you ran them. And so you can actually encode all of those percentages, and you can weight them with this binary weight. So like you can divide them by 2 to the power of the number of bits of the program class that you're looking at, and then you can sum all those together in an infinite series, and it creates a number that you can prove is an unknowable number, and it's called Chaitin's number, and it's got a lot of strange magical properties. One of them is that you can prove that no finite amount of like effort or calculation or derivation can ever like produce a system that outputs that number. Like eventually you will find that you can't calculate any more digits of it using whatever system you come up with to calculate digits of it. It needs a new system like every time basically, or every so many digits you need to come up with a whole new way to calculate it. And so it's got this kind of super elusive property of never being findable by like any finite set of heuristics. And so that's kind of mind-bending. But then you can look at the opposite of that, and you can
So
say
this
that
number
if
plays hide and seek.
Yeah, and it plays it better than anybody possibly can, practically. So, like, the other thing is that if you did somehow magically already know all these infinite digits of this number, that from those digits you could derive the answer to, like, every math question, like, that can be decomposed into a finite length statement. Because all these different, like, math problems can be written down as programs that attempt to prove or disprove. And you can write a program that terminates only if a statement is true by looking for, or rather, a program that terminates only if the statement is false, simply by going through all possible counterexamples. And since there's an infinite number of them, if there is a counterexample, it eventually reaches it after some finite number. And then if it stops on a counterexample, then if you know that that program stops, then you know the thing it's trying to disprove is false. And so, in a way, the number, like, encodes all of the truths of mathematics that you can possibly reach in, like, a finite number of steps.
Because
And so
every
it's like,
equation leads to part of it,
yeah,
but no,
it's
no
like,
equation leads to all of it. And so it's one thing that has kind of an infinite truth packed into it if you know how to unpack it.
yep, exactly. And so that's really wild, because then this
That
ties
is
back
mind-bending
to,
indeed.
it ties back to Gödel, because then you also know that there are a bunch of math truths that you can never prove or disprove. And so you're like, well, if somebody knew this number, they could prove it. Well, the loophole is closed. Nobody can know the number. So that's kind of like a fun, the
That's
other
wild.
connection between those. And it turns out that it's not the only number like that. There's infinitely many other numbers that have those kind of properties that are infinitely elusive and that can answer all kinds, infinite numbers of statements of things that otherwise can never be known. So it's like you have this infinite list of numbers. They're all infinitely long, and they themselves are unknowable, and each of them knows an infinite number of other things that are also unknowable, that would only be known if you had that number. And so it just this huge forest of mysterious math exists out there way beyond our ability to do anything about it. So it's not really the typical picture people have when they think about math problems. They're like, yeah, well, I mean, how many math problems, how hard can they be, right?
Yeah, well, it's just like, what would you do if you're a math major? Oh, you're a philosopher. I get it now.
Well, I mean, if I'm gonna get really almost like like somewhat religious philosophical, I did talk with a guy when I was back at Baylor, and we were talking about the idea of like souls and like materialism, and it's like, well, what could it be? And at the time I was like, well, it could just be a number, I guess, right? If you think of it being of a person being like an unknowable number, right? Then if they have some freedom of choosing to do things, and they sit around for an infinite amount of time, then there's going to be an infinite number of things that only they would know about, because it's their choice to choose a particular thing, right? Because you sit for an infinite number of time, you make an infinite number of choices. If you're the only one that controls those choices, then you're the only one that knows the outcome of those choices in advance. So you can think of it as being very analogous to the idea of immaterial souls, is that they themselves are very elusive, because you can't build these numbers out of ordinary math. They're too complicated, they're too long and strange. You can create a whole bunch of equations, but no finite equation would encompass any of them. And they're all like, they can all be different from each other. So like, even though Chaitin's number encodes the answer to all like finite like proofs, there are statements regarding other infinitely long numbers that it doesn't talk about. So the numbers have relationships to each other, which are also unknowable. And so we get all this weird, unknowable stuff where it's like, well,
it's like you're a pathfinder, but the paths are numerical relationships. Like, in a way, where it's like, I'm just thinking, if you have to find the number, but then you have to find the links between that number and other numbers and their relationships in ways that you can get that number to appear from other numbers. But every number is going to have a unique relationship to every other number, in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's me trying to make sense of this.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like how, I mean, in AI and stuff, people think about, well, mind is more software than hardware, or in Westworld, where I mean, I don't know, there's some spoilers, but at the very last episode of season 1, he says that the great
The maze
artist became music, right? And so it's like, well, I mean, are people themselves, or are they this music, right? Because you can think of a musical score, at least a musical score that goes on forever, as just being the digits of a number that are played out in order. And so you can think of all these unknowable numbers as also being unknowable pieces of music that are infinitely long.
I remember songs by thinking of numerical relationships between intervals. So that's like very relatable for me.
Musical talent.
I don't like to think about them as one specific key. I just think about them as the relative harmonies, so that you can transpose it into any key. And then if you just think about it as distances apart, it's less information to encode.
Yeah. I mean, I think I told you about, like, how for the longest time I went through some, like, phases where I couldn't distinguish numbers, and then I had another one where I could, like, only ever remember the relative, like, pitches of numbers, or not numbers, of notes. Couldn't distinguish numbers. Couldn't distinguish notes, and then for a while I could only really, like, tell the relative distance of notes, but, like, if somebody just asked me, hey, give me the note A, I would just be like, what?
Like, on an instrument?
Well, no, just like sing it or something.
Oh yeah, most people can't pull it out of the air, so that's pretty normal.
The differences between notes were a lot easier than, like, a particular note. Even then, I'm probably pretty shaky about just pulling a note out of the air.
I mean, I know very few people who can pull notes out of the air. That's perfect pitch.
Well, I mean, I thought you had perfect pitch, right?
Nah, I just got good relative pitch. Hi, Remy, how you doing?
You just have extremely good pitch. Oh, hey, yeah, it's the Remy guy. I haven't talked to him except to see him in chat. Yeah, we gotta, like, do that Tsushima game thing sometime. I still haven't really played Legends much. I've just been working through the single player.
I took care of the Glinthawks,
but yeah, a lot of stuff going on. Too many different games happening.
The sun has spoken. Thank you again, Savage.
But,
yeah, it's a lot to keep up with.
Great. They finally stopped calling me out.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really, like, plan out tons of stuff to say. I was just like, well, I'm trying to think of some things.
No worries. So how does that all apply to time travel? Because that's how we got to the topic.
Right. Now I need to remember how and why I was, like, mentioning that from within time travel. Like,
that's a great question.
Ah, dang, I'm gonna have to watch the stream to remember what I was saying.
No worries.
Like, I guess the idea that you can still have some ambiguity in how, like, loops break down, in terms of, like, you can have a setup where there's, like, multiple loops that are consistent with each other, and so what breaks that symmetry? And I mean, this kind of gets back into, I guess, philosophy, because, like, I did a lot of philosophy kind of from a theological bent perspective, and, like, they have a lot of different problems that come up, and one of them would be, people would talk about the paradoxes of, like, knowing things in advance, right? So if you, like, I don't know if you care to really go into, like, the philosophy of theological stuff, or that's, like, kind of...
Hey, if it's stuff that you were looking into and studying, then you're free to. And if it hits a topic where I'm like, let's not go there, then just figure it out that way.
This is stuff that's, like, really academic, you know?
Yeah.
Instead of very churchy, but
I prefer the academic to the churchy, so that works for me.
The idea of like foreknowledge and freedom and like arguing with people on the internet a whole bunch about like what that means, and so one of the interesting motivations like way back for like I guess that helped me kind of come up with some of the ideas that went into this whole time travel stuff was like well, there's got to be some way that time loops make sense if there is some kind of like out of time correlation or foreknowledge of things. Like it has to at least not be contradictory to know something about the future. And so one of those was like the concept of, well, you can't have free will if someone knows the future, right?
Yeah, like, well, because then your determinism thing
they
kicks
know
in
what
of
you're
like,
gonna
well,
do, and you can't do the opposite of whatever they do.
Because either they're a liar, or there's alternate timelines, or there's no choice.
Yeah. And so one of the interesting things is that even if they know something, if you're not causally connected to that knowledge, then it doesn't necessarily have an impact on what you're choosing. So like we go back to the idea of the soda. So you have a time machine and some guy's buying soda and buys Coke or Pepsi, I guess. And somebody else has a time machine and they show up from the future and they're like, I saw you bought Pepsi, now you must buy Pepsi because I'm from the future. And it's like, well, I mean, if you assume that this guy is telling the truth and he, didn't missee what's going on and his half of the loop is like very reliable, or in like the physics sense, it's very cold, then you're not going to have a lot of freedom. Just like a particle that is at a lower temperature can't move around as much. It doesn't have as much freedom to change its state. It's locked at the bottom of the curve of the energy well.
Lowest energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in some cases you have that where it is very low. But if that guy, for example, like he comes back and he tells you, okay, you chose Pepsi. But where did he get the Pepsi information from, right? You still have, if the way he operates is to always just observe what your choice is and then come and tell you what that choice is, then there's also another story, a whole nother parallel where he sees you pick Coke and he comes back and tells you that you picked Coke.
Which I just watched all 3 seasons of Dark, so that's like, my brain is here. My brain is ready for this.
And so it's like, well, so what determines which of those two timelines is the one that actually occurs? Because in both of them, it seems that there is an internal consistency. And even though you're like, my freedom is taken away by the guy, if the guy himself, I guess maybe he's a robot, and you don't know he's not a guy, but he's actually a robot who's programmed just to observe and report. He himself also doesn't have any freedom. But his observation still flows back to your decision. And so, in a sense, the point at which the information of which of those two occurs could be equally any point along that circle. And so if you're thinking from a philosophical perspective, where you're already thinking about people's decisions, like, I mean, in the frame of like theology, where people have like a soul that's somehow influencing their body or choices, you already have like physical events that are being caused by something outside. And so if you had a consistent loop like that, then you might as well just allow that loop to be determined by the same means. So in a sense that that guy's freedom isn't necessarily any more constrained than it would be in the ordinary argument between theists and materialists, where they like, well, you know, you're influenced by like chemicals that are actually making the decision versus whatever this mysterious impulse is that's disrupting your decision. Like, it's not any harder for someone to say that you still have freedom in a foreknowledge situation compared to the regular world of physics that we accept. Because at least in the situation where their observation is not interacting in a more complicated way with your choice. Now, if there's, you know, other types of things, such as, like, they are going by a more complicated program where the robot is also talking to itself, and it's like, well, I report FC regardless, for example, or like I report the opposite of what I was received if the choice is code. Otherwise, I report the same thing that I heard from myself. And so what he's reporting is not just what your choice is, but a combination of his own internal state and the outside choice, and that you have a more complicated diagram. Then it can affect the probabilities of the alternatives, because you don't have the same number of consistent choices. And so, yeah, this does kind of not exactly... I'm trying to remember how I got from there to Gödel's theorem. I'm like, well,
Probably some random comments I made.
yeah, maybe. Like,
I probably asked a question that's not actually linked to anything you were talking about because I probably misunderstood something, and then...
I bet it was the whole changing something from inside something.
Probably.
That was the common link, because that kind of comes up a lot in talking about dark, and then it also comes up in talking about Gödel's theorem, and that changing stuff, like changing things about yourself, can kind of require something outside of yourself as like an initial stimulus, a pebble or an avalanche. Whereas, like, you know,
For real.
It's impossible to address your own blind spots without having something to reflect off of, right? That's why they're called blind spots.
Real.
But yeah, fun time travel stuff is pretty fun. Yeah, I forget what all the things I went on about there, like about the super computers. Oh, my dog is whining. I believe she has to go to the bathroom, so I think I will take a short break.
Yeah, go for it. Take care of the pup.
Dog out. I do not want her to have a mess here, so I'll be back.
Yeah, go for it. Just bop that mute so I don't accidentally hear house noises.
Yeah, okay.
I just always feel really bad when I'm like overhearing someone's life and they might not know that they're live or whatever.
I'll be back. Bye.
Alrighty. I love the cultist plans. Override the tall neck. I killed it by hitting its weak spot, like I should. Like how the game's supposed to go. Proud of myself for that. What are these guys all hiding? Psh. This is some nice foreshadowing for the next game. There's a quest where... Look at all of them! There's so many of them! They got the Pharaoh logo painted on their camp. Not a good look for you, Ted.
Here we are.
I have to sneeze, you guys. Oh my gosh. I have a sneeze that won't come. Oh my gosh, I can't hit beans. Oops. Good news. There's a potion over here with my name on it. Wait. Where'd it go? There it is. Here, buddy. Sweet. Action. I love that little warble.
I'd have to ditch something.
Blurp, blurp. It reminds me of the bloop bloops in Bloodborne. You know what I'm talking about? The blue dudes that they go bloop 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 bloop. I call them bloop bloops. I know they are called celestial emissaries, but I call them bloop bloops. They're bloop bloops. Flute for Aloy. Aloy flute. It's a potion. Yes. Cool. Cool, 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 cool. Where is one of the tall things I can jump from? Fine. Oh, the melee in this game. How I adore even your weirdy quirks. How do I get up there? I want to get up there. Ladder, please? Ladder, please? There. No, not ladder. I don't remember how to do it, so we're just going to brute force it, and it worked, so there. I like that I just picked up arrows for a bow that I don't even have. That's cool. Where'd I put them? Damn, I really biffed the timing on that. Well, we'll get a nice little vista then. How's everyone's day going? How's your week? Happy Wednesday, everybody. A nice view of Day Tower off in the distance, I think. Yep. There you go. There's Day Tower. And now we're gonna jump on a tall neck. Welcome back. How's the puppy doing?
Oh, she's good. She's a little anxious. She saw another dog outside.
Real?
She gets scared of other dogs sometimes.
Makes sense. Dogs tend to do that.
Yeah. She's a pretty old dog. She has cataracts and can't see very far, so...
Aw, pupper.
Yeah. Actually, I think I'm the fourth person to own my dog.
Oh, wow.
She's
had a wild ride,
like
huh?
either 13 or 15.
Oh, damn.
She's getting really up there. I try to take good care of her. But I got her from Steve when he was moving up to Arkansas, and he didn't really have any place to take care of her up there. He was going up there to take care of his granddad, who was having some health problems. And but he got her from this lady that he used to do a lot of household stuff for and help take care of her. This elderly teacher that lived in Waco, like not quite in Temple, but like really far south in Waco.
Gotcha.
But, and it was her dog, and the dog had been left to her by, I think, her son-in-law or something. Like one of her kids, they were married and they had this dog, and they like moved and they didn't want to take the dog with them, so they left it to the mom. And actually, maybe I'm getting that confused with a different. I'm trying to remember exactly the history of it. But she used to actually have a lot of siblings. I think she was the youngest little dog in the group. And so, she might have some attachment issues.
We'll run to the litter.
Yeah, after living all this time and not having any of the old dogs left around. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
life's unpredictability hits us all.
That's true.
Alright, I've been through all that there is here. I don't know what else I do. I want to do more tonics. Sure.
So what do the Tallnecks do exactly? I mean, I know they're like nice and nice machines by the good AI, but I
Yeah,
don't know
they're
what they actually do for whatever
basically
that plan is.
signal relays.
Oh,
They map out everything, and they also act as signal relays in a 500-kilometer radius or something like that, kind of receiving information from what the machines are seeing. As far as I can understand, it's a two-way thing.
that's pretty cool.
So that's why you get the observer log. Eyes of Gaia. All the machines ultimately serve Gaia's purposes as a part of Gaia.
Yeah,
And so they're kind of...
I think she just wants me to hold her. She doesn't understand this whole microphone business.
Why are you talking to someone, not me?
Yeah. Well, she can be a little bit jealous, and she does follow me around the apartment when I'm here. So she's a very attached dog.
Yeah.
Needs a lot of comfort. But that's okay. He's a good dog.
Goodest pupper. Oh, this is the one that's by the long legs. That's right. Wait, what is up here?
Yeah, I've had a lot of dogs in my life. Just always really loved dogs.
We had dogs when I was a kid. I have a bite on my left arm from our Weimaraner that we got rid of shortly after. We just weren't ready to... Nah, I mean, it is what it is. I don't have any fear of dogs from it. I just have a really weird scar. And we had 2 Australian Shepherds. What? I'm out of... I gotta find a merchant. I'm out of inventory slots. Okay. Let's go back over here and sell my stuff.
Yeah, I had a German Shepherd when I was a kid. That was my first dog. I mean, when I was, really little, my mom had a dog that was her dog from before she got married. And the dog, I think, was a little, leery of me because I'm like, what is this intruder? I'm the baby. Now there's a real baby. I mean, she was nice enough, though. But then my first real dog was a German Shepherd named Ben, and then we got a mixed black lab, kind of a miniature black lab, that I named Max. And so I had Ben and Max as my childhood dogs, and they were a pair. They were pretty fun to have around. Man, it just really amazed me how smart Ben was. A lot of German Shepherds, I mean, they use them for police dogs and a lot of guide dogs and other actual dog jobs, I guess, because they're one of the smartest dog breeds.
They are very smart.
Yeah, I mean, he did a lot of interesting things. He figured out how to open gates and doors and other such things and get around all sorts of obstacles. Even to the extent that a few times when we went on vacations where we couldn't take the dogs with us, we left them at a dog kennel for a while, and he would escape and he would let out the other dogs and they would have a mini rebellion. That happened twice, which is kind of wild. And so
Can you hear the people
eventually
sing?
they put a combination lock on his cage,
That's
He
funny.
couldn't escape because he didn't know the combination.
That was kind of part of the problem with Australian Shepherds. They're too smart for their own good. Kind of like Aloy.
But I think it's a good breed of dog to have. They're very friendly. They're nice and big and kind of fluffy. I mean, they have enough hair. They sometimes shed a little bit too much, but I mean, they're very big and huggable. I mean, I was still small enough at the time that I could almost like ride around on him like a big,
Nice.
like a pony, you know. And
Was he cool with that?
yeah, he was okay with that. I think he thought it was a little weird, but he was. It was just a really amazing dog to have as a kid. Never gave me any problems. Never bit anybody or anything.
I know where
And
this
I think
is.
he barked at maybe some strangers if he thought somebody was threatening. Because I know a few of the times when him and Max would escape and they would stick together. And one time they got away from the house by figuring out the gate, and they got out the gate and ran off. And he actually somehow, I don't know how, but he somehow figured out, I guess, that I was at the elementary school, like, you know, about 6 blocks away. And he made his way over to the school. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just putting too much on him to think that he was trying to find me over there at the elementary school. That's where they caught him. And they knew the two dogs were together because they would try to catch Max, the small dog, and then would jump in the way and not let them grab him.
Oh my gosh.
He was protecting the other dog on their journey to find the elementary school. Because, I mean, nobody was home, so he just wanted to be by his people, you know? And sometimes I'm like, oh man, we should have kept the dogs inside, but I mean, he was huge. He was like 110 pounds. So, you know, he didn't make for a very great inside dog because he would be somewhat unaware of surroundings and just go
Yeah.
over everything.
God,
My parents
I
were like,
love it
"No,
when
he's
dogs
gotta
don't
stay
realize
out."
how big they are. It's so precious to me. Like, oh, you're not smart.
But they make up for it by being so adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dogs are good. Oh. So, I think I had them for a long time up until I was in college, just about. Like, we got them when I was in elementary school in, I don't know, first grade, maybe second grade, something like that, around then. And, I mean, I remember, like, him and Max both had, their health had gone and gotten really bad, and, like, I remember going back one spring break, I think it was, like, my junior year in undergrad, that, I mean, and he was, like, 15 going on 16, but, you know, he was in some pain, and he couldn't get up and walk anymore, and he was,
Aw.
you know, he couldn't do anything much, you know, he had too much trouble eating or going to the bathroom or doing anything. I think we postponed it a little bit too long, and I just like cried for days when I was with him at the vet, and I put him down, and it was so sad that, oh man, so much that I think my parents decided to do my other dog when I was not there and not aware, and kill me the next week because of just how much bawling. I just bawled for like 2 days or something.
Did that help?
It was still really hard. I don't think there's any good way to get around it. You
Yeah, I was
just
gonna say, it's like
pour
kind
a
of seems
lot
like
of-
you're kind of stuck one way or another.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it's good, you know? It's better to have good times than to try to avoid having to let go just by avoiding being close, you know? You just gotta pour all your love into these guys while they're here.
Real. And when did I get strong at this game? Aloy is like not even having problems with long legs.
Yeah. I remember. Oh yeah. Do you remember? I don't know if you knew. You probably knew about it. I actually got Cat for Allison back at Waco.
Mouse?
Do you remember? Yeah, you remember Mouse.
I remember Mouse.
Yeah,
I have a scar on my arm from Mouse.
Oh, I'm kind of.
Mouse was very friendly.
He was a rescue from the highway.
I loved Mouse.
Yeah. I was a little sad to hear that he, I think, passed away like last year sometime.
Aww. That's a long life.
Yeah, I mean, he got really lucky.
Oh no.
Finding a home.
Sorry, I just fell off a cliff and somehow survived it.
Oh, okay, yeah, now I see you falling. I'm on the short delay.
Yeah, I have a scar on my right arm. Mouse gave. I was playing with Mouse right before we went to Mexico one of those years.
Oh, the old Juarez trip. I remember those trips. I think
Before
I went on 2
Juarez was no longer a place to maybe take 600 college students to, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a whole conversation about missions and whether or not we should have been going there in the first place, but don't get me started.
Yeah.
In hindsight, that whole thing feels really gross, and that's why this is my no cult playthrough. Because it's very colonial, like, there's no respect for culture, like, oh yeah, these American college students are going to come in and tell you the way to live your life better. Right. These privileged Baylor kids know better than you. Okay.
Oh, I hear you. It was definitely not the best.
That, you know, those missions trips were about indoctrinating us, not about actually helping people. Like, it's about us getting the cultural experience of seeing other people's way of life, and, you know, I have a whole different perspective on all that stuff on the other end of it. It feels gross.
I mean, I remember the first trip, I actually spent a good part of the trip being incredibly sick because of how they have stuff in the water that's like different, some microbes. I don't know, but I got like super sick. It was like me, and I think David Pierce, and I forget who else, but there was 3 people who got incredibly sick on that my first trip down there, and we were just like bedridden for like I don't know 1 or 2 of the days. So yeah, I guess I missed out on some of the stuff that happened.
Yeah, you know, the kind of stuff you missed out on if you're a woman is talks where they say that you should be a homemaker and be happy about it because that's good service to God. And then they told us what clothing we can and can't wear, and said that basically if you're not wanting to be a Proverbs 31 woman and make a home for your husband, then you're not being faithful to God. And that's the place where fixer-uppers people attend. So think about that for a second, what that show's promoting. That church teaches 7 Mountains Dominionism, which is the core belief of the Christian Nationalists there were 6 groups at the Capitol insurrection, and 4 of the permits were to Christian groups. that are from a similar religious stream, if you will. Don't get me started. Anyway, so in the Seven Mountains, Chip and Joanna would be viewed as conquering the mountain of entertainment and of business, which is scary to me because that means that church views it as the favor of God that show got big. Anyway, that's a whole rant for me. Sorry. It frustrates me that to have sat through that and like, why does Baylor let them have all their students do Welcome Week volunteering and then love bomb students and recruit them to their church? It's just gross to me. Anyway. Anyway, sorry. I have my opinions on that. I would call them a pseudo cult, if not a full-on cult, with the way that they aggressively recruit and then abuse people in ways.
It's definitely, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. I guess I have a lot of mixed feelings, but definitely I think that is...
They demand a certain homogeny among people that really prohibits freedoms. Like, I remember at one question I was like, am I supposed to ask you before I buy a shower curtain? Like, where does this whole spiritual authority thing end? Why does everyone start dressing the same? Why does everyone start talking the same and wearing the same freaking, like, chacos? Like, the one person wears chacos, now we're all wearing chacos. Like, it just got weird. People lost their identity and started looking, and I wouldn't do that to the same degree as everyone else, and so I was like viewed as like sowing division because I was just not a straight up conformist.
Yeah, I think
they kicked me out of the band and
said
said perceptions matter while they kicked me out of the band. I was like, I see how it is. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Remember there was it seemed like there was a guitar phase where like every guy that I knew there was like, no, I'm going to learn guitar.
Well, because you had to be the worship leader in order to be a life group leader kind of thing, you know, charismatic. Anyway. Yeah. That starts getting into a whole set of conversation topics. Stop by Bright Market. I'm going to pick up this campfire, and then I'm going to go do this last tall neck, and then we'll call it a night. It's the tall neck stream. This one is going to take a little bit, because there's Ravagers over there, and long legs, and bellowbacks, and it's a whole mess. Maybe I'll save that tall neck for next time, because it is a bit involved. Let me at least grab this campfire, though. I'm getting kind of tired. I'm just like, do I want to commit to that much of a quest? Not particularly. No, I think I might just grab this campfire and call it. Did you have anything else to kind of add to the Godel stuff, or the time travel stuff, or the whatever, anything, Miss? Can or can't?
I'll probably think of something as
soon
as I'm in the shower.
Real.
You know?
Super real. That's where I do all my best thinking.
Yeah. You know what? That gives me a great idea. You mentioned shower curtains. I just realized how ingenious would it be if you could write on your shower curtain with some kind of waterproof mark, like dry erase or something, and then you could take notes from your shower thoughts. I mean, I guess you can already do that if you have like voice recognition.
Well, I figure you could probably do that more easily on like if you've got good tile.
Oh yeah, tile, that makes way more sense than a shower curtain. I was just like, shower curtains, shower thoughts. Gotta be a connection besides
I wonder if anyone's made like shower whiteboards. Because if you put it on the right wall, then it doesn't even get wet, and then it doesn't, if it's dry erase, it doesn't really matter so much if it gets wet.
It does make a lot of sense. I'm gonna have to like Google that.
I mean, I'll be really honest, I bring my phone in the shower a lot these days because I can like pop an audiobook on or a podcast or some music, and like it's water resistant, so I'm not really worried about it getting splashed or anything. And I've been doing that for a long time, and it still runs on a 4.5-year-old phone, so I'm not really worried about it too bad. I got the phone at the same time I got this TV and my PS4 Pro. When was that?
Cool.
I think it would have been 2016. I forget earliest.
I should look on
2017 maybe? It had to have been late 2017 at the earliest, because
it's a Galaxy A32. That's what I got. A pretty good phone.
I have an LG V30. I got it because it has a headphone jack. It's very important to me. My headphones are molded to my ear canals and cost a crap ton of money, and I don't use them for my job anymore. So I have to feel like they're good for something. So I got a phone with a really good audio driver.
Oh wow, molded ear canals? I've not heard of
that. I have to go
I
to an audiologist and have impressions made of my ear canals as though I was getting hearing aids.
That still sounds badass. I mean,
yeah, I mean it's
it
pretty
also
intense.
sounds
They're
badass.
very, yeah. It's it's 6 drivers per ear. So 2 lows, 2 mids, 2 highs, and then the lows are tuned to feel a little extra boomier, because it's a stage. It's intended as a stage monitor for live music, and since I was playing bass and drums, I wanted the extra low end. So it's not a flat response, but for bass, it let me have a better response. And it's just tuned better for the live feel. There's pros and cons to it, because it forms a seal that can be hard on your ear canals. So they have actually been making it in a way where it's not sealed, but then you lose dampening. So it's like, well, which do you want?
Like, I'm afraid to get the really small headphones that fit in your ear, like the earbuds and stuff. I'm paranoid I'll lose hearing or something.
Yeah, and this goes up my ear canal. It's molded, and it feels weird to talk a little with it in. I'm used to it, but it's you can lose your seal if it's not made, depending, because when you move your jaw, your ear canal changes shape inherently to your anatomy. And it's no variance to which that's going to occur. Well, that's the thing, is people still get these. There's some that are made with a different kind of material in the tip versus what's in... Wait, there's a different elevator to go up of? Wow, learn something new every day. I've never taken this elevator before. 11 playthroughs. Never done it.
That's cool.
So for singers, they have some where, the tip gets slightly malleable when it's warm, but not so much that it loses its actual shape being fit to your ear canal. But I had to send them back for revisions 3 times before I got a seal that stuck with, because I would turn my head and lose my seal, and then the low end depends on having a good seal, and I'm playing bass and using it as a monitor for bass, so I have to keep my freaking seal. And it was really annoying to work out, because it's just sometimes your anatomy can make that hard to actually functionally do. Oh, this one's right off of the King's Palace. Wait. No, it's not. It's the front entrance to the city. That makes sense that they would have an elevator there. Just never used it before. I didn't spend as much time learning my way around the city in this game as I have spent learning my way around stuff in Forbidden West. Partially because the traversal in this one, you have more options for traversal in Forbidden West. And so it's just... can be more fun, because there's more than just ground level walking or ground level riding a horse-like thing. There's 3 different mount types plus walking, and you can do more underwater, so there's just more environments and biomes to explore. Feels different.
Oh, underwater. Yeah, I don't think I've seen any underwater in this game.
Yeah, you can't go underwater. You can go underwater, but the camera remains above water, and you're just hiding from machines when you go under. So.
Yeah, my
alrighty.
headphones are just these old $10 Sonys that are the big pancake.
That's one of the
things.
problems about mixing. I can't use cheap headphones anymore. I get physically in pain if the mix on something is bad. it's just like you tune your ears to it, and then it's like how like when you're a kid you eat stuff you don't care, but then when you're an adult you're like, no, I can't have that version of that, because it's just like, nope, the palate gets refined, and you start to pick up flavors, and you're like, that's the thing I don't like. And it took a while to actually be able to listen to music again after. Get the palace. That's so gross.
Oh yeah, did you? I assume you like got to hear it. I sent you that file or that YouTube of the Zelda backwards thing.
Oh yeah,
Found on the internet.
I like skim watch stuff, but I wasn't in a place where I could like listen to it. So I actually haven't. I need to revisit that. I'm really bad at actually watching anything if like the more steps that there are to me actually consuming the content. Like if you send me a video and it plays in the chat, I'm a lot more likely to watch it than if it's like click a YouTube link and then listen to it,
Oh
etc.
yeah.
Because it's just like one of those like, oh, I'll get to that when I can kind of things, but it's just
Yeah,
ADHD, and then I
scrolls off
forget.
and
Yeah, it
all
scrolls
that.
off, and if it's not directly in front of me, it's like my mom is obsessed with putting everything in drawers, but I can't have stuff in drawers because if I can't see it, it no longer exists. I forget that I have stuff.
Context-based memory.
Yeah. And it's like I'll leave things in places, and if it's not where I left it, good luck remembering that it exists. That's why I don't like it if my
Same.
roommate is like, I have to live with people that are okay with the doom piles, the ADHD doom piles, and don't mess with my doom piles, because if you do, guess what? I'm never cleaning because I forget that everything in that exists, and I'm not going to
Oh,
think to
man.
look for it to clean it. I wish I was a different, better person. I'm very intelligent, but I don't remember what I own. Sorry.
Like,
I mean, I do.
just
I have a
relate
catalog
to that
internally,
so
but I
much.
just don't remember where anything is if I'm not the one that put it there.
Like, when I was a kid, I'd have those piles, and my parents would be like, "Oh man, you have such a messy room." And every
Well, it's
once in a while,
workstations. It's stuff
like,
that's related to what I'm using at the time. So it's not necessarily like a pile, but it's like I have my little like workstation that are all objects related to what I need for that task. So that if I need it, I don't have to add steps to going and finding it, because if I lose my train of thought, good luck on me completing the task.
yeah.
And that's
like,
not to say like that I don't complete stuff. It's that I just have a certain way I have to work, and if something's not streamlined, it's going to take me 10 times as long. So I streamline my workstations. Anyway, sorry. I interrupted
Oh yeah,
you.
I was just saying, like, it would look messy, but I would
Yeah.
actually know where everything was.
There's an internal system. Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes people would come, like my mom used to come by and be like, "I'm gonna clean up this mess," and she would like take the stacks and like put them all in drawers and things,
Oh,
and like,
then you never
and
find
then
it
I
again.
would be like the next
Gone
week
forever.
or two, I would not know where anything was, and I would just constantly be trying to find stuff, and I'm like, "Oh no, a cleaning! Now I'll never be able to find anything. It got
Yeah.
cleaned up."
Everyone has a different
that was
definition of
when I was
chaos.
real little, I think, you know. So
Yeah.
even then had the ADD stuff going on.
Well, because how each person's going to taxonomize stuff is very different depending on what they're thinking about how that thing is in its context. So it's like what's organized for you might be disarray for me, because you're not relating things to their associative categories that I would relate them to.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm getting kind of tired and getting a little bit of a headache and a neck ache, so I think I'm going to sign off. Be back on tomorrow. Would love to have you join whenever you want to, but like no pressure. It's just interesting to have math talk.
It's really fun to join. Sometimes I feel a little intimidated when I'm like, "Oh man, I need to think of some more interesting stuff to say."
Oh yeah, you don't have to try to do interesting stuff. Like, and one thing I learned from like improv music is like when you try to be creative, that's when you're going to be the least creative, because you are judging everything that's coming out a lot harder, and that actually is the quickest way to kill creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Makes sense.
you need to have a certain level of open-handedness to have a reactive creativity, to be in the moment and be present. Otherwise, you're too busy thinking ahead and you don't respond to what's right in front of you. Easier said than done. But
Yeah, definitely.
alrighty, I am gonna end the stream. Unless you have any last things that you really want to say to the world.
Oh, well, hopefully I'll still be around
Tonight. I
tomorrow
mean,
to say
tonight, you
them.
know, obviously no, yeah. I made that sound more dire than it needed to. I mean,
Well,
we do have like mega drought going on in Arizona and communities that have their water cut off and stuff like that, and multiple Northern California communities that also haven't had enough water to supply their citizens this year, but that's a whole conversation for another day. Alrighty, sorry. With that, I'm going to end the stream. I hope everyone has a lovely night. I am on every night at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that's all year because Arizona never leaves Mountain Standard Time. So you might change your relationship to my time, but we stay the same until that stops happening, which I don't remember when that goes live. But yeah, good night, stream.